going. Uh, get the recording started.
Yep, I got it.
Okay, you got it. Perfect. All right. Thank you everybody for coming for today's session. We know that some folks are off today for the holiday, so we did invite locals to our state call that we had yesterday afternoon. We had some good turnout on that call as well. Um, so we're doing this again today with you all to go through the application UAT. We are recording this session, so if after we get done with this, if you have some other staff you would like to walk through and do some UA user acceptance testing on the application, you can forward them the recording and the resources that we're going to provide today so that they can participate in UAT as well. I did want to note that on the transition page under the full list of resources, we do have everything you need for UAT Release 11 listed in the active UAT resources, so you can easily find the things that I'm going to be going through with you all today. So the first thing I want to talk through is our UAT guide. Sorry, zoom in here. Um, So we are doing release 11 cycle one, and we're going to be focusing on the application. You have from February 11th, we started it yesterday. We're going through February 25th to complete this UAT activity and provide your feedback. And you can access UAT through the link here. Some of you might already have it bookmarked from already participating in several other UAT sessions as well, but we always link it in this document. And then as you're completing UAT, you'll report any of your findings in the UAT notebook. I'm going to walk through that with you all after we go through the UAT guide. And as a reminder, because I know sometimes we do have some new folks participating in these UATs, so I like to kind of walk through what we expect for this user acceptance testing. The user acceptance testing is giving you guys a space to get in and look at what we have developed as things are developed. So it's not a fully complete intake process yet. We are focusing on the application portion of it for today's session. I'm going to break down exactly what parts of the application we're focusing on today. The way we have built things, application and eligibility certification kind of blend together. So we're going to be stopping after the data collection pieces of the application. And then in a future UAT, we're going to be looking at the last few pages of the application that help support document upload and signatures. As you are testing things in UAT, we ask that you log your entries as you're completing your UAT work. We find that we get better feedback if you are kind of logging things as you are doing it versus completing the entire testing and then at the end coming back to the notebook and logging things. This helps to ensure that you guys can detail out the issues and provide screenshots and all of that in the notebook while you're completing that testing. The top section of the notebook is labeled the example reporting issues reported. We give some examples on how you should report issues and why we need that kind of information. And then you will also find a section in the notebook labeled Release 11 application. It's divided into several pages, and I will walk through that with you to show you how you'll log those entries. When you're logging your entries, we want you to be concise but detailed. And if multiple issues arrive, you're going to log each one separately and provide context, screenshots, and identify the customer that you are testing as when you when you ran into the issue. And you can also put the URL of the page you were on when you ran into the issue. This helps us better troubleshoot things that are noted so we can take a much closer look at exactly what was happening in the system so that we can come up with a solution with the developers to resolve it. If you have any issues accessing the notebook or any issues even just like going through the UAT activities, we ask that you reach out to us. We will help make sure you can log into the system, access the guides, the resources in the notebook, and that you can complete the UAT activity. We always encourage you to reach out to us if you run into any stumbling blocks or can't move forward. Definitely let us know. The last thing we want is to get to the end of the UAT time period and hear from somebody, oh, I wasn't able to complete it because I couldn't log in or because I couldn't get to page 2. If you run into that, please reach out to us right away via email and we will get you some resolutions. We might need to hop on a call and see what's going on, but we will connect with you to make sure you're able to move forward so you can fully participate in the UAT session. These sessions are designed to get you in testing and looking at things early. So if we do need to make any changes or fixes before go live, we have ample time to do that. So it is very critical that we are getting you guys in and testing it so we can identify those things now and instead of on July 1 when we're up and running. Expectations for UAT is that we test thoroughly, that we're walking through all the different functions and features, detail oriented whenever you are providing feedback. Um, and then when we get that feedback, we categorize it into three areas: bugs, issues, and enhancements. Bugs and issues we typically are addressing before go live. Enhancements is one of those kinds of things we just have to see what time will allow for, so that we can get the core product ready and out for the July 1 go live date. Best practices for efficient UAT. So as you're going through UAT, some things that you want to keep in mind to make sure you're testing this in the best way possible is you want to think like an end user. So you want to keep in mind how a career planner might be using the system and how a customer might be using the system. Are those two engaging the system together? What that looks like. And we want to make sure that we're also testing from various, end user customer situations. So as you're going through, you can test this as various customer types that you guys encounter in your local areas. Be specific and thorough and provide context for anything you're giving us feedback on. One of the things we ask is if there's something that you find that you don't think's right, definitely we want to know that. Or if you think the text isn't clear, we want to know that. But we also ask you to tell us why and offer suggestions. So, say a drop down list looks wrong. You could tell us this looks wrong. I think it is missing, a couple of options. I would suggest adding A, B, and C. So we have more context as to what's going on rather than the list is just wrong. Do you guys have any questions on just kind of the overarching UAT process before I jump into the application activity that will be kicking off this UAT session? All right, I don't see anybody coming off mute when I don't see anything in the chat. So we'll move on to the next piece. So we are going to be testing the application, excuse me, and this guide will provide high-level overview of how we go through that process. We also have linked quick start guides throughout this. So if you need more step-by-step instructions, we have those embedded throughout this guide as well that you can access. Some important system rules to keep in mind before we even get into the application portion. This will just help make sure you guys can do some clean testing is all customers must complete a pre-screening before an application record can be created. So as part of this activity, we're going to have you guys re-walk back through pre-screening, and now we have pages that will take you even further into the application process. We have made quite a few updates on pre-screening. The feedback we got from the UAT session was great. There wasn't not a lot of significant changes, but we have made some small changes throughout pre-screening based on a lot of the UAT feedback we got. So you guys will be seeing those. Additionally, a customer can only have one pre-screening application record open at a time. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in the next section. Data identified when a customer profile is created will be pulled into the pre-screening application to help pre-populate responses. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a future session as well. I'm sorry, not session, section as well. And I'll give you guys some examples when we get to that. And then if you guys need to get back to a pre-screening or application, say you start the UAT, but you don't get all the way through the end of it, you guys can access a partially completed pre-screening or application through the customer profile by going to the intake summary section, and it'll be listed in there, and then there'll be a play icon that'll let you get back into that record. And we have a screenshot right here. So you go into their profile, and then in this intake summary section, they start an intake process button will be grayed out because they already have an open record, so we can't start another one. And then you can click play to get back into that pre-screen record. So there's two different ways that you can go through and test the intake process. The first one is the career planner path via their IWDS profile. So by using the IWDS profile entry point, you are simulating initiating the pre-screening as a career planner or intake staff member who is going to walk through the pre-screening and application with the customer. And there's a couple different ways that you can go through this route. There are the first and the recommended way is that you use a customer in the UAT notebook that we've created. So I'm gonna open that really quick. So we created 60 test customers. We created 60 test customers in the system. We have them all listed here, and we have the tracks that these customers were built to try to simulate these various program tracks. Let me jump back here. So you could pick one of those customers from the list, put your name next to it to claim it, and then we have associated personas that follow along that customer. So that this link here will open up our personas listing. So this list of customers matches what's in the notebook. So you could pick one, say you pick Victor. In the notebook, it tells you that Victor is on the dislocated worker substantial layoff track. This persona will give you an overview of the customer and then give you some data points regarding this customer that you can use as you're walking through the pre-screen and application to help answer those questions. This is the recommended route that we recommend you go through if you're testing as a career planner, intake staff member, helping the customer complete intake. The other one is you can select an existing customer from the list. So if you don't want to use one of the 60 we have, you can pick one from the list. Maybe you already have one set up in UAT that you've tested as. If you do this, you need to keep in mind our rules up here that they must complete pre-screening before application and that they can only have one pre-screening open at a time. If you go in and somebody has already started pre-screening for that customer, you're going to see where you can't start a new one and you're going to pick up wherever it was left off. You can delete them out, so you could delete it out and start a new one. When we go live, the delete function is not going to be there for just everybody, but for testing, we do have it there. So that is an option as well. If you want to use an existing customer, you can delete that out. Or you can add a new customer to the customer list. If you do that, we recommend that you use your first name and the type of customer you plan on triggering. So, for example, like Olivia Youth or Olivia ADW. That'll help you just know that you can get back to it and kind of that it's your customer. And help encourage that other people don't go in and use a customer that you have your name in your program with. And I did want to note again, too, so if you're using option 1, 2, or 3, the customer has already had a profile created for them. When we create a profile, we are determining or we're adding some data points regarding like their age, their gender, veteran status, disability status, race, ethnicity. With that information being put in, that is what's going to pre-populate some of those data points. So for example, Victor Hayes, one of our test customers, we had him flagged as he is a veteran and he has a disability. So when you get into the pre-screening, there's going to be a couple of questions that are auto answered because it's pulling that data through and assuming for the question of like, do you have any health concerns? It has the box about I have a disability auto checked because we had already identified that previously in the system. So I did want to note that in case you're like, why in the heck is this already showing checked? Where did this come from? If you're using an existing customer, it's pulling in the profile data to help answer some of those questions. And then if you want more information on accessing the pre-screening through the IWDS profile, we also have a quick start guide that you can open. It's linked in that document, and this just walks you through exactly how you can go and you can find them and then go into their pre-screening section and initiate a pre-screen. The second path is a self-service path. So we are going to create a public-facing WIOA web page for job seekers that explains what WIOA is and the types of services it can provide to them. And then if they're interested, there's going to be a short form they can fill out and click submit, and it will initiate an email to go to the customer that will invite them to complete the pre-screening. If they are flagged as potentially eligible in the pre-screening, it'll allow them to then move forward into the application as well. So this path we are testing as if we are a customer doing intake on our own. The questions that we see will be different if we're completing it as a customer versus as a career planner when we get into the application. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a further section. But to do it through the self-service entry point, we do not have the public facing job seeker page built yet. We have it defined and are working on getting it developed next sprint. But we do have on our test page, we have an applications pre-screening section where you can at least get to the short form that will kick off that pre-screening process through the self-service route. If you use an email like olivia@fakemail.com, the system will read that and take you directly into the pre-screen and not require you to wait for an email. We have specific code in here to streamline us getting into the pre-screening by using this @fakemail.com in the email. If you use your real email, then you will get an email in your inbox with a link that you can click to get into the pre-screening. Under this form, and I'll show you guys when we look at the system, there is a table that lists all of the pre-screen records. So if you do initiate one through the self-service, you can look at that table to copy the link to get back in it at any time. So if you do have to go away and come back, you can still get into the self-service entry pre-screens. And then if you use the real email option, all you need to do is re-click the link in that email and it will take you back to where you left off in the pre-screening. And then, so both of these have guides that will walk you through how you can access the pre-screening either through the career planner route or the self-service route. Then you're going to complete the pre-screening. You're going to complete all the required fields. Um, and a customer must be identified as potentially eligible in order to move into the application. So the big things that would make somebody not eligible or unable to determine eligibility in the system is if you have somebody who says, no, they are not a US citizen and no, they are not authorized to work, that would immediately take them out of the ability to move forward into the application from the customer level. If you're doing it as a career planner, you do have the option to still move forward, knowing the system didn't determine any potential eligibility, but the career planner might have had a conversation and determined they want to move forward. The other way is if you have a youth customer, so in this situation, they have to be under 18. So you have somebody between, I think it's 14 and 17, and they do not meet the youth criteria. They would be too young to be recommended for adults, so they would also get the not eligible page. So just be mindful as you're testing. You want to try to test as if you are triggering somebody to be potentially eligible so that you can move into the application process, especially if you're doing it through the self-service route. The pre-screening and the application use a dynamic process, so the sequence of pages and questions will vary based on the responses you provide. So it's not going to look exactly the same every time you walk through it, because if you're somebody within the youth range, you're going to see the youth questions. If you're not in the youth range, you're going to see other questions. If you say, yes, I'm authorized, or yes, I'm a US citizen, you will not see the question, are you authorized to work in the US? Because you've already met that by being a US citizen. But if you were to say no, then you're going to get sub questions. So the way the pre-screening and application works is dynamic and will vary based on how you're answering questions. We have the quick start guide that walks you through completing the pre-screening. So if you need more step-by-step guides on going through these pages or more information, we have this guide that walks you through completing the pre-screening process. This review page that you get to, or I'm sorry, the next step page you get to will look very different depending on if you were testing it as a career planner or if you're testing it as a customer through the self-service route. Both options, as long as you trigger as potentially eligible, will give you a path to move into the application. After you complete the pre-screening, the last page you're going to see is the next steps page. And as part of that, you're going to see a button to start the application. Once you click that, you're going to be directed directly into the application. It's going to look very similar to the pre-screen and the setup. It has a different page set and different question sets, but a lot of the data is being pulled into the application from the pre-screening, and we're just answering a few additional data points to ensure that we can verify eligibility. We're going to take a closer look at the application in the system, so I'm going to go more into that in the system. Some UAT reminders is the goal of this UAT session is to test the application and make sure we can successfully navigate it and complete the application pages. We really want you guys focusing on system behavior and workflow, transitions, and the data that we're capturing. It's really how the system behaves and is it behaving the way it needs to for customers to move through the application to determine eligibility, not necessarily having like the perfect test data. So we created those personas to help give you guys some test data to use. We don't want you worrying about trying to come up with a bunch of fake addresses or names or whatever. The test data itself is not as important as testing the various workflows and eligibility tracks. So please feel free to use those personas. We also recommend using real examples. So you guys have customer applications you guys can access. You're familiar with customers that might be coming in and the situations they have and how they would go through the application. We do say make sure you're changing any PII if you're using some real examples of customer applications, changed up their name, changed up their date of birth a little bit. Don't put their full social security numbers in for, we're in a testing environment, so everybody's seeing everything. We have a lot of the business logic constraints on social security number off. We will be putting more back on as we move closer to go live, but for testing purposes, we are not like restricting that you can only use a social security number once. So I highly recommend if you put a social security number in, you just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It just helps keep things clean and not have to worry about having real social security numbers in the system at this time. But so those are the two different ways we recommend trying to come up with test data without having to overthink it. Again, we have the persona list linked here as well. It's also linked above when we talk about using one of our test customers. And then just some general navigation information is that we have the side panel and the pre-screening and the application that you can use to kind of navigate through the various pages. So those are there, as well as buttons at the bottom. And then we talked about the responsive questions. So again, the questions and the pages will change depending on how you answer things. So we're only answering asking the appropriate questions based on the customer situation. And then the system uses a customer-centered design. So the pre-screening and the application were written using customer-centered and asset-based language. We also tried to use plain language, so get away from a lot of jargon, heavy text. And it was all written at a 5th to 6th grade reading level to ensure clarity and accessibility for all of the users who might be coming through the pre-screening application process. Then we kind of defined what we exactly mean when we say customer-centered and asset-based. So as you guys are reading through this, that has been the overarching mission and vision for the system is to be customer-centered and written in a way that our customers can understand what we're asking and trying to work through with them. Do you guys have any questions before I jump into the notebook and then into the system? All right. So this first tab here is the reporting examples. So if you have any questions about, how do I report an issue? We have an example here. We would have the name, the date that the issue was found, the browser you were using, and then explaining what the issue is with the screenshot. And then down here, we just have what makes a good comment. So, we know the name in case there's questions. We know who to talk to, the date provided the issue was found. That way, if something is changed, we know, oh, we pushed out an update for this. That's why we're not able to replicate it. We've already resolved it. Versus we pushed out an update and it's still an issue. We need to take another look. Browser just helps us know how to better troubleshoot. And then it kind of goes into like, we want to know what user you're using so we can take a closer look and what action was taken and the issue that was identified. So I did this thing and this is what I found. And then why and how it should be resolved. So I talked about this earlier, but this is just kind of breaking down how these comments really help us to not only identify the problem, but have a general path that we can move forward towards when we are trying to define a solution to any of the issues that arise. The next tab is Release 11 applications. This is where you guys will be working in. The first page we have here is the participant check-in. So we have all of the various testers from state, trainers, core local group, extended local group. And then if there's any additional folks that are going to do testing, we just have an additional box. I brought this over from pre-screening because we had quite a few folks in doing the pre-screening testing. We ask that when you come in to do your testing, you put the date that you started your testing on. Say I did it today, I'd put 2/12/2026. And say I came back tomorrow and I'm going to do it again. I'm going to update that 2/12 to 2/13. So we can always see the latest and greatest date that you guys were in testing it. It's very important to us that you do check in just because you might not find issues, but we need to know how many people are coming in and doing this UAT testing. It's very critical to the implementation of the system and ensuring a successful go live that we have significant testing across the state to make sure this is going to meet the needs of our various local areas that are supporting the WIO Title I program. Then the second page is the test customers. So definitely come in and you can claim a customer or two. Like I said, we have the tracks listed out here. Most of these people are going to also trigger for adult. So like Victor, when he's recommended, we're going to recommend adult and dislocated worker. There will be a few youth customers who might be too young, so they're only recommended for the youth program. They're not old enough for the adult. We put the primary program. So just because we don't have adult in all these doesn't mean they're not also going to trigger for adult as long as they meet the general eligibility requirements for adult. I have a page here for pre-screen findings. So if you find anything in pre-screening, you can put it here. We've already done UAT for pre-screening, so I don't anticipate that we'll have a ton, but if you do find anything, you can note it here. Then we have pages for each one of the application pages. So as you're going through the various sections of the application, you're going to have a different notebook page where you will log your findings based on whatever page you're on. This just helps us keep things structured as we're going through so we don't just have one application page that has 50 comments that are all over the place, but we can look at this in a more standardized way to say, okay, there's everything going on the introduction page that we need to address, and we can kind of group together things that are related to better troubleshoot and put together solutions. Then, we'd move on to profile. And we'd say, okay, here's everything folks found on the profile page of the application. So we have a page for all the different pages you're going to be testing in this UAT session. Any questions on the notebook before I start driving through the system to show you guys what we're going to be looking at? All right, so I wanted to show you real quick on our testing page under this pre-screen applications, I open it. So right here is the short form you guys can fill out if you're wanting to test as a self-service. Down here is the table. So we are bringing in all the pre-screenings, even if you do them from the profile. But it logs the most recent. So as you guys add some in, you'll see self. These are the self-service ones. You can then click this link and you can then paste it into your browser and go back into a pre-screening that you started. So once you complete this form and click test, it's going to log you right here for you to be able to pick up where you left off. And then if you're testing through the intake career planner path, you are going to find your customer that you're going to test with. You'll click into them to go into their profile, and then you can scroll down to the intake summary section. We are going to update this UI. We have some cards for the sprint, next sprint to update that. We've been working on really just finishing up some core function, but we're going to make this a little cleaner. Right now, it's going to just be in the table once we start the record, and the instructions go through how to use it right now. But I like to just note that we do have a few updates coming to this to make it a little cleaner. I also want to note that do not worry about this application table. If you go into a test customer and they have an application listed here, until we can get the application up and running, we have a back-end application that we're setting up to do some other things. That's going to be replaced once we have the full-blown application in place. Right now, we're just going to be working out of this big table, this top table right here. So we're going to click the Start Intake Process. You're going to want to click complete with the customer now. If you use this option up here, it's going to initiate a self-service kind of route where the customer would get a link to complete it on their own. All of the test customers we set up are using @fakemail.com email, so there's no email is going to go out. So you won't be able to really streamline your way of getting into there. It's just going to become a record, and then you're going to have to click play and go into it. So it's a lot easier to just go with this complete with the customer now option and click confirm, and then you'll be taken directly into the pre-screening process. We have the introduction page here. So we are testing this as a career planner intake staff member. And so there's some text here for career planners. Obviously, if I'm doing this through the self-service route, I'm not going to see this kind of text because I'm a customer. So I'm not going to see the career planner specific text. We do have the Find Local Help feature linked. It is connected to test data. We do not have all of the centers listed in the test data. We still need to seed that. So it's not finding all the actual offices because it's connected to test data. I like to note that so people don't think there's an issue with it. The data is just not there yet. But you can go through all of the pre-screening pages. We're gonna, as part of the UAT, you're gonna complete these. You will see some updates in a couple of areas. We've updated things like the job search. So instead of using all the stock code stuff, it uses more plain language. We can, type those in and pick the various occupations we're interested in. It allows us to pick up to 3. And then that's adding those to the table. It's a cleaner UI than what we had previously had. Then down here, we have our situation questions. So a lot of these we have added options like I don't have any. Those weren't there before. On my customer, when I created the customer profile, I flagged they had a disability. So you could see this was already checked because it's pulling that in from data it already knows. We can go through and answer various questions. A lot of these are tied to if related questions are asked further in the application, they're being verified and we're pulling that data through. So we don't have to re-answer it, but just ensure that it is correct as we're working to certify the application. Then we have our skill screening page. So we added some career planner text here. Again, if I'm testing as a customer, I won't see that. We'll go through and answer these various pages. I'm going to update this customer to be a little bit older. Try to trigger the dislocated worker route. So I'm too old for the youth, so I'm not going to see those youth pages. Instead, it's looking to see, do I have potential eligibility as a dislocated worker? Again, the questions are dynamic, so If I say no, it's going to show me the next one. I say yes, then it stops. Um, you're going to see that a lot throughout the intake process. The next page is our review screen. We're going to confirm that information is correct. And then I am now on my next steps page. So as a career planner, I have the ability to see this information and it's going to let me check. This is the programs that's recommended based off of my pre-screen results. But it, notes to the career planner, like there might be local policy in place, you might have conversations. At the end of the day, it gives the career planner the flexibility they need to move forward with the additional or remove applications. Then how will you start your application? We're going to continue to move forward to complete with the customer now. If you choose this option, essentially this is just a way to let the career planners, maybe they help them with the pre-screen and then the customer is going to do the application on their own at home later that night. You can move through the various paths at these different points. So you're not committed to doing the full thing either on their own or with help. But it does have those different routes that you can use. We're going to, for the purposes of the testing for today, we're going to continue to complete with the customer now and click start application. So this is where the meat of the testing is coming into place. We really want you guys focused on this application portion. So there's text here for career planners specific to the application and then some customer overview text. Again, it's just pulling this in, confirming that is correct before we continue to move deeper into the application. Once we start the application, our pre-screening kind of gets locked down. So we're not able to go back and edit pre-screening data because all the pre-screening data is pulled into the application. So if changes need to be made, they will naturally be made as we move through the application and verify that information. So there's no need to have to go back to a previous page and change something so it updates in the application. We'll just update it through this workflow. So profile information is coming in. So on the getting started page of the pre-screening, I had identified my housing situation. So it's auto answered that. It's pulled in data from my profile. And I'm just going to continue to move through and answer some of this data. It's going to use it does validate email or yeah, not email. It validates the address. So if somebody puts in an address and it has a typo or is entered incorrectly, let me see if I can get it to trigger that. Uh, it uses USPS feature where it'll say like, did you mean or recommended address that you can choose to use the recommended address to make it a little cleaner. And then this address in poverty area? This question right here, this will not be a question. I think this was a comment that I saw on the notebook. This question is going to be auto answered. We are doing a bunch of mapping on the back end with the street address to determine a high poverty area. There are a couple different ways a high poverty area can be determined based on if you live in a high poverty area or contiguous counties, and then calculated together equals high poverty area. So we've been doing a lot of back end work to run all the various scenarios using the address to determine if it is in a high poverty area as defined by the various policy reasons. Um, so we have in this sprint and next sprint, we're taking that and we are connecting it to the application address. So right now, this question here to let you test as if somebody was or was not in a high poverty area. But as we move further into the sprints, this question will go away and it will be mapped behind the scenes and displayed to the career planner. And it will show what data was used to make that calculation. And that will be the documentation that would support eligibility certification for a high poverty area. It'll be stored with the record. So we are working on that. That's why this question looks a little different because it will not be shown once we can determine that from the address based on back-end calculations we're running. Then Here's an example of where questions are dynamic. So if I say, no, I don't have a phone, it's going to auto-populate email as the answer to the next question because I don't have a phone to be called or texted. If I do have a phone, I see more questions. And then if I am able to receive text messages, this list continues to update based on the different ways that I could be contacted. Then you can add additional contacts. So you click the add contact button, you'll fill out this box, add those contacts, save it. You can add as many as needed, and your additional contacts will live in the application. Veteran information. So I had previously said, no, I was not a veteran on my profile. So it has an auto marked no. If I had said yes, my question set would look different. Are you a transitioning service member? No. And because I said I was singled, not singled, because I said I was single for my marital status, it is not asking me the qualified spouse question. If I would have said something like I was widowed or married, or there's a couple of options that would equate to potentially being a qualified spouse, those will then that question would show. So that is just another example of how we've tried to use some logical assumptions to make sure we're only asking relevant questions. Who will be able to see if the poverty area is confirmed? So that would show to a career planner. So if a career planner was helping the customer do the application, then we're gonna see that the address they entered would equate to being in a high poverty area, and then we'll also display the data that made that determination. We're not necessarily making that customer facing because a customer is not going to really know what all of that means. We just need our address so that the career planners and intake staff members can have that for eligibility purposes. The next page is the private information page. So it's pulling in data that I already input. Um, I had selected that I had a disability. I had selected on my situation questions that I had some legal issues, so it auto marked this yes. Um, so a lot of these questions we've mapped to the situations on the profile to help auto answer some of these. I do have some additional testing going on right now for the childcare one. That mapping doesn't seem to be working the way I expected it to auto answer these. So I am having our quality assurance tester take a closer look to make sure this is mapping correctly to the getting to know you better page in the pre-screening, so that if I indicate on my child care dependent care situations that I do have children or I'm potentially pregnant or I am pregnant, that these would be auto marked correctly. If you are a male, you're not going to see like I am pregnant right now. So that's another example of how these questions might look different depending on how you are testing this. If I had flagged on my profile that I needed a language support because I had trouble in one of these various areas, this would be auto answered. If during the skills screening, I said that I couldn't read, write, or speak or understand English, there's questions in there that equate to having trouble in these areas. If I had marked one of those on skill screening, they would be auto marked on that they would come in with this already answered that way. And then we would be working to answer the second part of the definition of English language learner. So it's trouble with English in one of the areas. And then English is not their first language, or English is not the main language spoken in their home. So we need to meet both of these to meet the true definition of English language learner. The next question is our social security number question. So there's information we would provide to the customer. Only career planners see the social security number question. If you say yes, you're going to input that social security number in there, and then you're going to enter it a second time to ensure accuracy. Again, we recommend just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for testing purposes. The education page, so I'm testing this as an adult dislocated worker. So this page looks a little bit different for adults than it does for a youth. A youth are going to have more questions in here because we're going to need to know they're in school, out of school, and if they're in school, what type of school they're in as we're working to determine eligibility. The next page is our employment page. So this is our dislocated worker page. So confirming the track. And then this person is triggering that they need a dislocation job. So if you do trigger a track such as like displaced homemaker or spouse of military member, you don't always need you will not trigger a dislocation job. So we're only showing this, please enter your dislocation job information in this situations of a dislocated worker where a dislocated job is needed. We have hooked up the employer search to search EBS and the DNB database. As part of, wrong document, as part of the persona data for those who trigger dislocated worker tracks that require a dislocation job, we've entered some dislocation job record information. The the search here is hooked up to the EBS test database. It is not hitting the EBS production database. So if you guys happen to be familiar with dislocation events happening in your area and you search them, they will not show up because this is using EBS test data, not live data. I ran into that and was like, oh no, it's not working until I realized that it was hitting the test database. So as part of the um, intake data records, or I'm sorry, the persona intake items, we have listed employers that are in the test database. So I highly recommend, even if you're not using one of the personas, that you do use this if you need to enter in a dislocation job, because it's going to give you better data to search that would be in the test database. So if I type in global test equipment, it's going to let me know it's searching. It's going to go out and hit EBS and DNB. And I'm going to look through and be like, okay, so this is what I want. And then if it's connected to an EBS event, it'll pull in all those events. This one only has one. So I can pick the event I was associated with and click OK. And then it's going to auto-populate some data that you'll see here. So it, employer name, it auto-populated. Address, it's auto-populating. Layoff date notified, projected date, and actual date, all that's auto-populating. Things specific to the customer obviously have to be manually entered in. It's pulling in the NAICS code. Is this a declining industry? And hold on one second, you have to type in occupation, and is this a low growth occupation? Right now, we're having to manually answer those. We are going to have these auto answer like we do in IWDS. We just have to get the back end data hooked up so that we can make that determination based on the code selected. These will become auto populated answers. We're also going to make, so right now you're entering the job title here and the occupation here. That's the same thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to update this to use the search that's down here where we pick our job and click OK. And then it'll just pull it in down here to show us the code and auto answer this question. The questions down here, right here, all these from this point down are career planner specific questions. So if a customer was entering this, they could pick their employment record, but we're not going to ask them anything or show them anything on the NAICS declining and occupation low growth and the UI claimant. We are also updating the UI claimant question. We have some third-party data we need to connect to make these questions auto-populate. So in the future, you're not going to be able to say, like, yes, RISA referral, this would be auto-populated based on data we're pulling in from IDES. And then if it was a RISA referral, it would auto have yes marked as well. If they were a claim in another way, then we need to make sure the career planner is verifying. So there's going to be some dynamic ways in which this question set works together. depending on if it is determined based on third-party data we have in the system, or if it's something the career planner is verifying outside of the system and answering. So that's another question we do have some additional updates coming on. I do see a couple questions in the chat, so I want to pause and look at those. Um, for the dislocated worker, what about if the customer received UI benefits within the last 5 years? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Omar.
Um, I'm asking because sometimes we can qualify somebody as a dislocated worker based on a UI lookup for the past 5 years. So if they received any UI benefits in the last 5 years, they qualify as a dislocated worker.
Do they have to meet other criteria too? That's not the sole criteria, is that correct?
Other criteria like what?
Like they have had to have lost their
No, just
uh
just just being having UI benefits within the last 5 years qualifies them as a dislocated worker.
do you know which of these ones that falls under, or is that like a caveat that's outside of our traditional tracks?
Um,
I'll note that and connect with the state team to make sure that we didn't miss that.
okay,
I was not aware that there was just being on UI alone in the last 5 years made you eligible for dislocated worker. Like in this scenario, you have to have been laid off, either have one of these and have one of these. So I'll connect on that. If you have more information and you can send it to me
sure.
so I can have that conversation on what could be missing, that would be great.
All
What
right.
was the change on
Olivia, I
that?
think that's under the unlikely to return. He's probably referring to if they exhausted their UI benefit. Every local area has different policies on look back periods. So, like our area in 17, the look back period is 2 years. Some local areas don't have a look back period, but it pretty much refers to the one you just showed on the eligibility, yeah, the number one there. So we can determine if
Okay.
somebody has exhausted their monetary benefit. There's like look back periods there, but they still have to meet the other area too, like the low
Okay.
growth or the job that they were dislocated from has to meet that area as well.
That makes sense. So there's local policy that kind of ties to this that says within 5 years or 2 years or that there's no time period.
Yes, we have 2 years as well. Because when he Omar mentioned that question, I'm like, 5 years, that's a very long time for a look back, especially if the person had multiple jobs and stuff. So, yeah, I'm almost going to say it's a 2 years look back because 5 years, I thought they got rid of the 5 year look back for companies and stuff, especially if it was in a different company this person got laid off from. But I'll wait to hear what the answer is going to be from DCO.
Perfect. And I see more comments in the chat, but it looks like it's just saying kind of what we're saying. What will be done to determine whether someone is determined as underemployed, since that may be dependent on local areas' definition of self-sufficiency, which varies widely area to area. Um, so we have for underemployed, we have because isn't that is specific to the military underemployed, and then we have questions that are looking as if they meet the underemployed, but the local areas will have to know their local policy to make sure they're meeting that. So,
Yeah, we had
see.
some that might be one to also get feedback from the state. That's a good question. Just because we had a thing. It was a long story, but it's a county board, workforce board was asking about like underemployed and with those people, what are their wage gains and that. And in IWDS, there's a field in the application screens. I believe it's in the employment characteristics screen where you can check underemployed, yes or no. The career planner can check that. And understandably, you know, their logic was, oh, this person's working at as a CNA and, you know, making only, you know, $15 or $18 an hour or something like that. But it's like, yeah, but they're either sometimes they're a high school dropout, but like if they've only completed high school, you know, it's like so there is actually in the WIOA policy, the DCO and I work at there's a standard definition of underemployed that is, you know, employed at a in a job that is not commensurate with your previous work experience and education and employability. So, you know, some were arguing, not to nitpick, but like some were saying, well, yeah, but you know, if they're a young adult, I mean, they don't have much work experience, you know, they're 18 or they're 22 or whatever. That isn't really underemployed. I mean, but we understandably, you know, the career planners looking at it like, well, that's underemployed because you need to be making more money now because you are an adult and you want to be independent, or you're a single parent or something, or parenting youth. So, I mean, you know, there's like, yeah, there's different definitions of underemployed, and that actually would be really good to see if they have guidance on when they want us to select that, or if we can go with our local definitions of that. And then the other thing, just real quick about the unemployment or dislocated worker, in the job records now in the work history section of IWDS, you can check. It says job of dislocation question. So if you a question mark and then there's a Y or N. So if you check yes, that triggers that employment record to be the one that the system looks at when it's when it's discerning the criteria if it's been met for Title 1D eligibility. Whereas here, you know, it's asking more of the questions about their situation. But in the current IWDS, you know, we can say, yeah, this is a dislocation job or not. So that's where sometimes it gets it's a little different from the old system.
Yeah, and so in the application, we're only collecting dislocation jobs if they are a dislocated worker who would require that. When we move into the getting started assessment, we're looking at a wider work history area. Any more questions on this before we look at the last page of the application? And I am taking notes in my other screen too. So the next page is family and household information. So this is looking at if there are any income items happening or any kind of assistance that they're receiving. And then we have the question, have you ever received TANF? If they say yes, then we look for how many months they've gotten help. If they say no, that's the end. This is looking at potentially exhausting TANF benefits. So we have this is the last page that we currently have stood up in the application. We do have more pages coming. So this is not necessarily the end of the application. We're the next page that we're building this sprint. When we started back into work for it, the previous sprint is a document upload page. So we are trying to build a dynamic document upload. So depending on what eligibility items they trigger, we're asking for various documentation that they can upload to streamline the process for eligibility certification when they go to meet with a career planner. So a career planner can upload here, a customer can upload if they're doing it on their own. And then we will have, if you're a customer, after the upload page, you'll get some next steps about setting up an appointment with a career planner to do eligibility certification. If you're doing it as a career planner, sitting down with the customer, then you would be able to move into, once we have everything answered and we're ready, we can sign the application and work to certify the application. We want to embed that process into the application steps if the career planner is like doing it with them. If the customer is doing it on their own, we're going to have some additional screens that facilitate the eligibility certification by reviewing the application and documentation and collecting the signatures and certifying. So that's the next piece that we're working towards, where we'll have another UAT session once we have those steps put together to test the last bit where the application and eligibility certification start to kind of bleed together. So will we have a page to list all of the family members? So if somebody triggers that they are, so we have the family income calculator embedded in a way that it only triggers if they don't meet low income eligibility through any other routes for youth who require low income. And if they don't meet the priority any other route, then we will allow for the family income calculator. We'll have a question that displays that triggers that question. We do not trigger it unless absolutely necessary because it is a lot of work for the customer to do that family income calculator. Even like if they don't need it, then we don't want to make them provide all of that information. That is the only space we have where they would list like how many people are in their family. Is there a need for that outside of the family income calculator? And then Toriana, I see you have your hand raised, so I'm going to go to you next. So Sandy, I guess my question to you is, do we need the family listed outside of it being used for the family income calculator?
I think my question is similar to Sandy's, and I think what she's probably trying to get at is, for me, like the definition of a family when it comes to, because a lot of times we had questions on our application where people will answer, yes, my family gets SNAP, and then family is like a grandma or something, and they're not really, that individual doesn't actually get SNAP benefits. So if there could maybe at this point be some sort of info bubble that kind of gives them an example, the list of what like the definition of family as it relates to WIOA, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm. Because it's really just, married. It's a whole definition thing. And so a lot of times we get people that answer yes to that question. And then by the time they get through the whole process, we're thinking they're on SNAP benefits or have gotten it in the last 6 months and they haven't, because they're not a part of the family technically that
Right.
did. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I put that in the
for
notebook for us to include that in here.
yeah, and for a while I think it was like member of household, and it was like it had to be narrowed down to family, right? Because I think people were interpreting it a little too loosely, like a member of the household receiving SNAP or TANF. So yeah, that's a good question for clarification.
So you said the youth need to list all the family members on the application. It is different than the income calculator. Do you know, is that part of like an eligibility requirement or why are we getting all the family members listed for youth?
They list them for in the household.
What?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
They have to list on the application for the youth. They have to list like all the members in that household.
Do you know the like why behind that? Is it an eligibility need or that's not something that's come up in any of our discovery, so I'm just trying to
It's
understand
not a
how it's
requirement.
used.
It's not a requirement to list the family members for eligibility. I think that's an internal document that agencies are using to list the family members as a part of the assessment.
One of the things that we're going to do to support signatures for youth is have them provide, if they're underage, a parent or guardian that can sign the application for them. That was the only youth eligibility requirement. But Sandy, if you want to put some more information in the notebook about that, we can take a closer look and see if there is anything we can do in the application for that. We've been really focusing on trying to keep the application focused on eligibility and priority to get them in. And then that might be a space like in the getting started assessment that we expand on to learn more about the family and the household and how they'll support the customer and their, training and employment goals. But we have really been trying to focus on keeping the application true to like eligibility and priority of service. The family size for low income eligibility. So yes, so if you do not trigger, so youth has the low income requirement for eligibility for in school, and then there are a few out of school items that also require them to be low income. If they don't meet the if they don't hit that eligibility, then they're going to have on this page, we're going to incorporate the family income calculator. And then if they're adult or adult and they don't meet priority any other way, we then say, hey, you might want to do the family income calculator if you think they would meet low income through that so that they can hit that priority. But that question will only show as a last resort question to capture low income through the family income calculator because of how complex it is versus if you are eligible through low income through one of the other traditional routes. We would rather have them do that and show that documentation, but it will be in there. Perfect. I see a couple questions in there. So that's another thing that we're trying to do with the application. And there's actually another page. It's the career planner page, and I didn't hit it because I didn't. Hold on, let me open the page up. We want the customers and the career planners to only be asked relevant questions. So if we already have determined basic skills deficiency through the basic skills screening tool or through another route, or like this customer triggered it because they met the English language learner definition on how I answered it, we're not going to show them like, hey, you can add assessments for basic skills deficiency because we've already triggered it. Same thing with the low income. Like, we're not gonna say, hey, do you want to make this person low income through the 5% window for youth or the needs additional assistance 5% allowance for youth if they've already met eligibility another way. So there is a page, and we talk about it in this guide. There is a career planner page where we're gonna see right here. This career planner page will only show in some situations when the customer did not meet basic skills deficiency through a traditional route through the screening tool, or they did not meet English language learner through the question set, we will ask the questions. The career planner page is only asked to the career planners, and it's kind of like a catch-all. If we were not able to determine them eligible, and the only way we can do so is through low income basic skills deficiency or English language learner, then we will have very specific questions to display to try to capture if they meet those criteria another way, such as meeting basic skills deficiency through a TABE or CASAS. We ask the English language learner question because the customer might say like, oh, I think I'm fine, but as you're talking to them or the career planner is talking to them, they might realize that, oh, you actually do meet the definition of English language learner, and we can use that to support your eligibility. And then the low income comes into play for the income calculator and for youth for the 5% allowance for the low income. And then there's also like a needs additional assistance. And I can't remember off of the top of my head either in school youth or out of school youth, one of those, there's also a 5% allowance who can be eligible for youth for needing additional assistance. The other one's as many as you need, as long as it's the last eligibility option, and one is 5% allowance. So we have some additional questions on the career planner page that are triggered if they don't meet eligibility through any of the other traditional routes. And then we're embedding some additional features in there so that if you want to request making somebody eligible under the 5% window, you will say like, I want to request this, and then an email will go to the Title I administrator for them to approve it. Right now, we don't have the roles and the users set up. So there's similar button to the high poverty area where it's like saying, hey, this will go to a career planner, or sorry, a Title I administrator to approve. But for now, do you want to approve this? Like act as if you're the Title I administrator approving it and can pick yes or no. And if you pick yes, then now you're making them eligible as low income using that 5% window. This page you're likely not going to see unless you're not meeting eligibility or priority through any of the traditional routes in the question set. In this page, we do have a few things we need to hook up, like the role, once we get more of the role-based stuff input into the system. Well, they have to list the family with the income calculator. They list the family size. I believe we're still building out that income calculator piece to show. It's the next thing that I think we have coming out with the application is embedding the family income calculator into it. So for now, the last page that you're going to see is either the family and household or potentially the career planner. But know that we are working on getting the last few pages built in that kind of move us into the that determination and certification of application role. Are there any other questions? We've got about 15 minutes. So for a priority of service, we still have to get that developed. We have it mapped, but as part of the eligibility certification stuff, we're also going to be mapping in priority of service. We have, sorry, let me find my priority flow. So we have veteran, and then we have low income and basic skills deficient status. And then for determining the levels, if they are veteran and low income, they got first. If they are, well, this is how we have it. Second would be somebody who's low income or basic skills deficient. And then somebody who is, the third is they are a veteran, but they are not low income or basic skills deficient. So the guides are linked in the UAT guide. So in here, we have them linked, like how to access as a career planner, how to access self-service, completing the pre-screening and completing the application. So they're linked in the UAT guide. And then we also have them on the transition webpage.
Okay,
So
I was
right
going
here.
to yeah, I was going to the resources page, but I was like, oh wait, are they embedded in the guide? So sorry, I should have had the UAT guide open to follow along while you were doing this, and I would have seen that. So thank
No,
you
you're
for
perfect.
reminding me.
They're actually in both places. So we have them in the guide and then also on the resources page as well.
I know that makes me more ashamed to ask because it's like it's foolproof. It's like two places. Thank you.
Yeah. Then it said, oh, okay. Yep, that's the guide. We answered the priority. Any other questions? I think I've answered all the ones in the chat. So if anybody has any others, we still have a little bit left. So happy to answer any other questions that you guys have. I also want to remind folks that you do have to log in using the single sign-on. So those will be the credentials that we had set you guys up with in previous UAT sessions. If you have any issues getting logged in, let us know. If you have new staff who've never done this, who you want to test, they'll need to connect with us so we can get them credentials. You can use the list of people to reach out to that we have in the UAT guide. We have our names and emails all listed here. So you can definitely reach out to us and we'll get you set up to get access.
Yeah, I have a question, Olivia. I was wondering if there had been any progress on my situation where because of my UIS login being different, but trying to go in through the same place, that was getting confused, so I couldn't get into this. And they were supposed to be working on some way to get me in.
I do not know, but I will connect with Lynette and Kelly and have them get that resolved with you as quickly as possible. They might need to reach out to do it to get assistance with that, but we will get you in here. I think we can do it by this week as long as there's no big barriers with do it. So they'll be in contact with you to help get that resolved.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Kelly T, could you connect with Lynette on Joel's access and see if that's something you guys can get resolved, or at least get an update from her
Yes.
and let
Yeah, I
Joel
can do
know
that.
if things are in the works?
Yep, I'll get that moving.
And Joel, if we do find out it's going to take a while, we could also, if you have like a Gmail or Yahoo or another email, we can set you up temporarily to use that one and just grant access through that.
Okay, well, I could create a Gmail anytime if
Okay,
needed.
well, hopefully we can get your other one up and going, but we'll have that as a backup solution in our back pocket if we find out it's going to take too long, because we don't want to make you wait to get into UAT.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, I will let you all go. As a reminder, please contact us if you do run into anything. Definitely want to help everybody get in and be able to get through this. Everything is on the transition page, so you can get in as soon as you're ready. Kelly, will we also be sending out a summary email as well?
Yes, I'll get that out this afternoon.
Perfect. And then feel free, if there's other staff you think could provide some good insight and benefit through going through this, you can forward that information to them as well so that they can participate in this. We'll get the recording posted to the page, and then we're here for assistance for any of you or your staff that might need assistance to get through this UAT assignment. I really appreciate you all joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You as well.